Hello! Welcome to Relax Tutor Girl. Today's tutorial is Anatomy 101, Muscles. I first took anatomy in grad school. Everyone in my class had a background in kinesiology, but I didn't. So I was quite lost for things that seemed very obvious to them. My goal with this video is to clarify things for you if you're a beginner, so that you're not so lost in class as you start studying anatomy. So with that being said, let's get started! So if you open up your textbook, so your textbook organizes information according to body region, in this case the arm. Within each region, the information is organized according to different layers. So there is the superficial first layer, the intermediate second layer, and also the deep third layer. And within each layer, there are certain muscles that are in that layer, and there is certain information provided for each muscle. So that's the proximal attachment, the distal attachment, innervation, and main action. So now I'm going to explain what each of these terms mean, so that when you read your textbook and see those tables, you'll understand what they're talking about. Layers. We are made of layers of muscles on top of a skeleton. So you have a deep layer that's closest to your skeleton. On top of that are a bunch of other muscles that make up a middle layer. And then on top of that is the superficial layer, which is the layer closest to the skin. So let's pretend we're dissecting an arm. So once you remove the skin and all the fat, this is what you'll see. This would be the first layer of the muscles, and if you remove that, you get the second layer, and then if you remove those, you'll get the deep layer of the muscle, and then if you remove all those, you'll get down to the skeleton. So why is this important to know? Well, this is your most basic foundational knowledge of being able to locate or identify any given muscle in the body. This particularly becomes important for bell ringer exams. For now, you should know for every region in the body what muscles are found in which layer. So how to memorize this? Well, your textbook does organize this information according to the layers, so you can just very easily quiz yourself. For example, you might say, okay, what muscles are in the first compartment of the arm, and then just list them in your head. I would also highly recommend going to your anatomy museum. They usually have various dissections of the different layers, so you can see in person what they actually look like, and you can appreciate the different patterns that appear. So the different layers have a unique appearance, and if you see it in person, you'll get what I mean. For example, in the front part of the arm, the pronator teres region, the first layer, always has this configuration of the four muscles crossing over like this. So if you recognize patterns like this, you'll be able to identify a muscle quite easily on your exam. Origin and insertion. So muscles attach to the bone through muscle tendons. The attachment points are called the origin and insertion. Other names are the proximal and distal attachment. So why is this important to know? Well, for a bell ringer exam, often they'll ask you to identify a muscle just based on the tendon alone. So you don't see the full muscle, you see a cut muscle. So it's not good enough to know what a full muscle looks like. You have to rely on knowing exactly where the muscle attaches. The other thing is, by knowing the attachment points of a muscle, you can visualize what the function of the muscle is. So if you know where it starts and where it ends, you can imagine what happens when that muscle contracts. So for example, with the bicep muscle, you know that it attaches to the shoulder and also the elbow. When the 2 points come closer together, meaning when the muscle contracts, the elbow bends. And that's the function of the biceps. So how to memorize this information? Well, it's important to know that general information is not helpful. So for example, in the biceps, it is not useful to know that it attaches on the shoulder. that does not help you for an exam. You do need to know the exact attachment site, and for the biceps, it would be the radiotuberosity of the humerus. That's a mouthful. So to help memorize that, I would recommend memorizing in layers so that it's more manageable. For example, I might start by memorizing that it attaches to the humerus. Once I know that, I will move on and add the detail that it attaches to the tuberosity of the humerus. And once I know that, I'll add on the last detail that it attaches to the radiotuberosity of the humerus. If you're good at memorizing, you may not need to break it down so much like this. But if you have trouble memorizing, this is a nice tip to get you started. For some next level memorization, what I would do is then look at the bone and identify every single muscle that attaches to a given point in the bone. Now, if you're able to do that, you'll really know your stuff, and you will be officially a boss. Actions! The purpose of muscles is to do work for us, whether it's to help us move or to hold us up. Each muscle has a specific function or a main action, and several different muscles may work together to do the same action. Where it may get confusing is that a muscle is never not working, at least not 100%, even during an action that isn't its main action. What? For example, we know the triceps muscle helps to straighten the elbow. But when we bend our elbow, it doesn't mean that the triceps stops working. It actually is working to help control this movement so that I don't hit myself. Ow, ow, ow. So a muscle is never completely off or asleep, which becomes important later on during clinical applications of anatomy. So how to memorize this information? Well, for starters, you can start memorizing what each muscle does individually. So for example, I might quiz myself and say, okay, bicep muscle, what does that do? Okay, it flexes the elbow and supinates. Then I might work backwards, meaning I can group all the muscles together that do one function. So I might quiz myself and ask, okay, all the elbow flexors, what are they? You can also just visualize where the muscles are, as I stated before, and visualize what they do based on that. The last thing you can try is to anchor the movements in your own body. So for example, when I'm exercising and I'm doing bicep curls, I can quiz myself and think, okay, where am I feeling this exercise? And that way I know that this action is controlled by the biceps. Motor innervation. Nerves are like electrical cables that connect from our control center, the brain, all the way down to all our muscles. When we want to move a muscle, the command starts at the brain, and it sends a signal through our nerves and then reaches our muscle, causing it to contract. This means that if the brain or if the nerves are injured, we won't be able to move our muscles properly. So there are many nerves in the body. Each nerve is in charge of a group of muscles, and in turn, each muscle is controlled by a certain nerve. So what we would say is that muscle is innervated by that nerve. So in your textbook, there will be a column that says innervation, and under that would be the innervation for that muscle. In the case of the biceps, it would be the musculocutaneous nerve. You'll also notice there are these two letters next to it, C5 and C6 in brackets. What's with those brackets? So to understand that would require a whole other tutorial about the nervous system. So for now, I'm going to really simplify things for the sake of this tutorial. So our entire nervous system is like a complex mesh or a continuous network of wires that starts at our brain and runs all the way through our body. You can also think of the nervous system like a tree with the big trunk starting at the brain, which gives off bigger, fatter mama branches, which then give off tinier baby branches. So let's take a look at the biceps muscle as an example. The biceps muscle is innervated by the spinal nerve C5, C6. You can think of the spinal nerves as that fat mama branch. The bicep muscle is also innervated by the peripheral nerve, the musculocutaneous nerve. You can think of the peripheral nerves as those baby branches that stem off from the mama branch. So in the case of the biceps muscle, C5 and C6, the mama branches, gives off the baby branch, the musculocutaneous nerve. And that is the innervation of the biceps muscle. Clinically, this means that if the spinal nerve or if the peripheral nerve is injured, your biceps muscle may not function properly. You probably will need to know both the central or spinal innervation and also the peripheral innervation for each muscle. The only way I did it was just memorizing through practice and repetition, so good luck with that. So that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful, and I hope that it does clarify some things for you as you're learning anatomy, in particular muscles. If you have any questions, feel free to write it in the comment box down below. And if you like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with your friends, and give it a thumbs up. One final word of encouragement, I actually failed my first anatomy exam. And considering we only had 2 exams in our whole class, that was quite brutal. But thanks to the help of a friend, shout out to John, and also studying hard, working hard, I aced my final and passed overall. So if you are struggling, know that you're not alone, and it probably means that you're just not studying in the right way, or something is confusing and tripping you up. So you can do it, just keep motoring on, and until next time, happy learning!